Are you wanting to do strength training but not interested in packing on a whole bunch of muscle onto your frame? A lot of people feel this way and they end up sacrificing how effective the strength training is because they're changing what they're doing when they're working out. But fortunately, there are some simple things that you can do during your workouts to not only make sure you get the benefits of increasing your strength, but not build all the muscle that you may be concerned about building. On this week's episode of the Exercise is Health podcast, it is exactly what we're laying out for you. We're going to cue our introduction and then we're going to dive right into this conversation. Welcome to the Exercise is Health podcast, where we will be breaking down the strategies and tactics you need to know to build your health, strength, and function without feeling achy, sore, or injured.
We're your hosts, Julie and Charlie, the creators of the Exercise for Life membership. Your podcast starts now.
Hey, welcome back, exercisers, to the Exercise is Health podcast, brought to you by Exercise for Life Studios, where we believe that your health is your most valuable asset. And the single best thing that you can do to both boost and protect this asset is exercise. Specifically, exercise that's geared towards building the health and function of your muscles. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie.
And today we are discussing this idea of doing strength training, but in a way that is not going to pack a ton of muscle onto your body, because a lot of people understand that, hey, like I want to maybe build a little bit of muscle. I know that I want to get stronger. I want to keep my strength. I want to keep my mobility and my function, everything like that. But I don't want to get super bulky. Like I don't want to look like those fitness models. I do not want to look like the people I see in the magazines. So how do you go about structuring your strength training to avoid getting super bulky and still be able to get all the benefits that you are wanting from your workouts?
I think a good place to start, Charlie, is to acknowledge that most people, unless your workouts are a significant effort, you're not going to get bulky.
Exactly.
Most people. Now, there are some genetic people, like just in your genes, you started out with a whole bunch of muscle. And you see these people online sometimes. Like this woman I follow, she had a six-pack when she was 10. And another lady I follow, she had these like bulging big calves when she was like 4.
Solid genetics.
Those are genetics, right? So that is something we cannot control. But what we can control is what we're doing when we go and exercise. Now, whether you want to be bulky or not, you want to be slim or whatever look you want to have, you have to resistance train. Because when you do not resistance train, your body will suffer, right? Your function will suffer. Your strength will suffer. Your ability to move and live your life and do the activities you want to do in your life, those are all going to suffer. So you have to resistance train. But you can do different stuff when you are in the gym to bias yourself so that you do or don't get bulky. And that is what we want to talk about today. So I wanted to give that to you first because so many, especially when I work with a lot of women say, well, I don't want to weight train, so I don't want to get bulky. Well, most likely, if you are bulky right now, it is not because you have too much muscle. And so the muscle piece is what's going to allow you to do the things in your life. And that's what we're all about, is like, hey, we exercise so that we can be healthy and live the way we want to live, not for other reasons. So that's what we're going to be talking about today in specifically.
Exactly. And the other thing to keep in mind is with everybody that you're seeing, as far as the fitness models, the people in the magazines, the people on social media, most of the people, if they actually have a lot of muscle, they are using some type of performance enhancing drug, and mostly because like that's kind of their job, right? And so understand that like unless you are injecting yourself with testosterone or something like that, which most people are not, it's going to be far less likely that you develop that kind of physique from a muscle perspective simply by taking the advice that we are going to lay out to today. Because like you were saying, Julie, there are so many reasons why you need to be strength training. Strength training is an absolute must if you want to keep your function, if you want to keep your health, if you want to obviously keep your strength and mobility and everything like that, especially as the years go by. So if you are not interested in packing on muscle, but you are interested in enjoying all the benefits of strength training and everything that can come as a result of doing so, what should you do about it? Well, a lot of times what we think we need to do is actually completely backwards of what we actually see being done. And this is why we felt it was such a necessary point to have this conversation, is because the idea that most people have in their head of how they need to go about changing their exercise is actually in the exact opposite way that they want to be changing their exercise in order to make sure that they are able to get the benefits of strength training, decreasing the likelihood that they build a ton of muscle, but still being able to get some muscle that they're wanting.
Absolutely. And when the conversation comes up about, hey, I don't want to get bulky, but also I am exercising, then the thing that most people are usually doing is something like doing light weights or doing yoga or Pilates or something that is movement and is not going to be anywhere close to keeping or building muscle. Now, the problem here is that if you're doing that, you're doing a really good job of getting in some movement. Mm-hmm. And that is really important for your health. But the part where you're building your body is missing. And again, I know you don't want to build muscle or become muscular, but without doing the building exercises, like doing your resistance training and pushing yourself in that way, you will start to lose function, become more tight, less mobile. You will lose muscle, and meaning like lose strength, like you can't do as much stuff. You'll also just lose total body conditioning, right? So we still have to do the build. We just have to bias what is in the build. And so we know we can't just be doing super light weights and yoga and Pilates for your building. But what can we be doing? I think what we really need to highlight here is that the people that get big and bulky in the gym are doing a lot of volume. And that is not necessary for you to get all the health benefits and the muscle benefits when you do your resistance training. So we're going to just leave that part out.
Exactly. And so we want to consider like three different variables, okay? The first is the intensity. The second is the volume, like you were saying, Julie. And the third is the frequency. And a lot of times when people think, okay, well, I don't want to get super bulky, but I still want to get stronger, what they end up doing is sacrificing the intensity and possibly sacrificing the frequency, but maybe keeping the volume kind of right where it was, all right? And like we said, that's the exact opposite of what you actually want to do, okay? You want your intensity higher, you want your frequency higher, but what we're going to do relative to, like, if you're really trying to pack on muscle, it's going to be a lower volume. It's going to be just kind of less volume overall, but the intensity will be higher and the frequency will be higher, much like you were trying to build muscle. And so that is the shift that we recommend taking, but there are some nuances to making sure that not only are you able to implement this consistently, but do so in a way that is not going to break down your body. And so we're going to get to those, but first kind of let's talk about this intensity piece, because like I said, that's a lot of what people end up sacrificing. And especially as they get older, they're like, well, you know, I can't lift like I used to. So they go to the exact opposite end of the spectrum in trying to intensely challenge their body. And there are some issues that can come up with that. So Julie, let's kind of dive into this intensity piece and tell them what we mean by that.
Great. So what most people do, as I said before, is they lose the weight, right? So they do light weight and they do like a lot of it, right? So that means you're doing low intensity, a lot of volume, right? So what we're saying is you got to switch it. So we want you to get heavier weights, increase your intensity, and do less of it. So less volume. So maybe you're not taking an hour class. Maybe your weight training went from doing an hour long of, light weights in a group fitness class, and now you're doing, 20 minutes to 30 minutes focused, but more intense. So the reason you need to keep the intensity is that when you're keeping the intensity, that's what creates and maintains changes in your bone and your muscle, your brain health. It's the intensity. And then if you wanted to build bulk, then you would do the intensity over and over and over and over again. If you don't want to build bulk, then you just do some of it, right? You don't do it over and over again. So we're leaving out the volume of it. But also this intensity is what's going to allow you to keep your exercise also kind of tight, right? Like you're not like letting it overflow into every area of your life, which is people that are big and bulky, that's usually like their life.
Exactly.
Is the gym.
Exactly. And so when we're talking about intensity, a big piece to understand is we are discussing the intensity of the last rep, or the intensity of like the very end of the set before you decide, okay, yeah, like I'm good, I can't do another rep. And what we see happen so often is when people decrease their intensity, yes, they'll lighten the weight, but they also will not go to as high of a level of fatigue. And the fatigue is really what's going to drive the changes for your muscles in terms of increasing your strength, being able to build muscle, but then we'll regulate the volume so it's not more muscle than you want to build, but you still need to get to a relatively high level of fatigue. And so that is one of the biggest areas where we see people stopping short, especially as they get older, out of fear of injury, which I completely get, like not wanting to hurt yourself. Look, it's terrible, like going in to work out thinking you're going to do something to improve your health and function and leave feeling worse, feeling injured, feeling like the rest of the day or the rest of the week or the next 2 weeks or month, like I can't do that much because of what I just did during this time that's supposed to be improving my health. Like, we don't want that at all, right? And so people try to then ease off the intensity or the fatigue that they experience during that last rep. And actually what we want to give you our guidelines to make sure that that last rep is actually really safe and that you can keep coming back to it. But that's really what we are talking about from an intensity standpoint, is not necessarily, you're going to go and everything's going to be like a 1 rep max or, a 3 rep max or anything like that. But if you are using weights that feel easier at the beginning of the set, you are going to do them until you get to a higher level of fatigue, not just for like 10 reps and you're like, yeah, I could really do this for 20, but I want to keep the intensity lower to make sure I don't hurt myself.
Yeah, this separation of like everything that you and I see, Charlie, in the research that creates health changes is saying you need to go intense. Mm-hmm. And everyone that needs this, which is every human on earth, but when you're pretty young, you can handle a lot of stuff. And when you're older, you can't handle as much stuff, is that intense means injury. And so these principles is exactly what we talk about all the time on this podcast. It's also what we completely based our Exercise for Life membership on, is that we need to teach people, how do you exercise, hands-on, how do you exercise so that you can do it intense and not get injured? Because intensity should not be teetering on the line of injury. And it isn't when you follow these principles. Okay, so we're going to jump in now. The first one is you got to move slow.
Yes.
When you resistance train, you have to move slow. Mm-hmm. And if you're not the slowest person at the gym, then you're doing it wrong. You need to move slowly. Moving slowly provides a couple things. Number one, it makes it so that if and when your body needs to talk to you and tell you something, right, in terms of a symptom, zinging, something pulling, it will tell you immediately. And you will be able to adjust what you're doing. So when we listen to our body here in the Exercise for Life studios, we do not just listen. We listen and we adjust. Like we have to do both, because we can't just listen or else nothing's changing, right? So we listen and adjust. Moving slowly allows you to listen when you need to listen. So let's say you're doing a squat, and sometimes squats hurt your back. Well, if you're moving slowly, the immediate time when you're going too far, or you're going too much, or you're going too much weight, you're going to find out right away, rather than 1.5 reps later because you were, doing power fast squats, like super fast squats. Number two, it's going to emphasize our next points, which I'm not going to totally give them away, but it will help you highlight the muscle that you're working. When you move slowly, it is very difficult to not feel your muscles. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times we think when we go to work out, it's all about doing the reps, doing the sets, doing the weights. It's really about challenging your muscles. So when you move slowly, it will allow you to challenge your muscles more, which that's how you get all the health benefits anyway. So first thing, you gotta move slow.
Exactly. Then number two, while you're moving slow, like you were saying, Julie, you want to be very mindful of your symptom-free range of motion, staying within the amount of motion that there's no pinching, no pain, no tightness, no discomfort, no zinging, no popping, nothing like that. Like, it feels smooth and it feels completely fine from a motion perspective. Now, if you're hearing that, you're thinking, well, I know some exercises that like I can't move at all, otherwise I'm getting that. The alternative is you can always do isometrics. Like, you just find a position. For example, let's say you're going to do a knee extension where you're seated and your knees are bent and then you're straightening them and you feel the top of your thighs like really burning while you're doing it, okay? Or at least working. So you can, if you're like, okay, well, my knees really bug me while I do that exercise, you find the part of the motion where they start to bug you, and then you don't go into that part of the motion. Number two is if you're like, they bug me from the beginning while I'm trying to move, you see if you can just kind of hang out at a position of knee bend, whether that knee's more straight or knee's more bent, somewhere within that particular range of motion. And you say, okay, right here, if I just squeeze my quads and try to, tense my muscles and feel those muscles contracting, does it hurt? And if it doesn't, as long as that is symptom free, aside from the muscle fatigue, now all of a sudden you have an opportunity to then strengthen your muscles in that position, strengthen those muscles in a very similar manner to as if you were doing the motion. And then as the strength in those muscles improve, what you'll often find is you'll be able to start to incorporate the motion just like you may have been intending to start. So that really is the second thing we want you to keep in mind. Number one, move slowly. And number two, when you're moving, stay within your symptom-free range of motion.
The last thing is you got to focus on your muscle squeeze. Like I said in point one, the whole goal of going to exercise is to squeeze your muscles. It's not to move, it's not to jump around, it's not to dance. The goal is to squeeze your muscles. So the more that you take your brain and you're thinking about connecting to your muscles, the more your muscles will contract and participate in the exercise. So the more that the focus is on squeezing, the internal part, not about 1, 2, 3, 4, all that stuff, we're taking internal, the better off you'll be, and it'll help you stay injury free. It'll help you highlight the intensity that we're trying to get without having to do tons and tons of volume.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a huge part. And when you really start to get more proficient at these mind-muscle connections and focusing on the squeeze, if you are concerned about this idea of intensity, meaning like you need to use a lot of weight or whatever, just by shifting your focus from what's going on outside of your body and trying to move the weight to instead putting it on that muscle squeeze, a lot of times you'll find that you may need to cut the amount of weight that you're using in half just in order to be able to do the exercise and keep your focus on the muscle squeeze. So if you're worried about the load or the amount of weight that you're using, focusing on the squeeze will naturally, for a lot of people, reduce the amount of weight that you're using. But because you are going to a higher level of fatigue and doing so consistently, you're still going to build that strength and you're still going to be able to kind of build and maintain muscle without the concern of getting super bulky. So this muscle squeeze is a huge piece. Now, one thing that we need to highlight with all of this is the workout that you do today needs to set you up to come back and work out again tomorrow. Okay, this is the consistency piece that we so often talk about within our content and that we design all of the exercise or the workouts for within the Exercise for Life membership to make sure that you can keep coming back and exercising today, tomorrow, the next day, next week, next year, next decade, literally for the rest of forever. And so what a lot of times it ends up happening is when we hear that, okay, we need to go more intense. And when we hear that, okay, well, I need to be able to, work my muscles to a high level of fatigue. If we miss any of these kind of 3 steps of like moving slowly, staying within your symptom-free range of motion and focusing on the squeeze, it can actually reduce the likelihood that we are able to come back and do those exercises consistently, which over the long term is not a recipe for maintaining our strength or maintaining our muscle mass or building our strength or building some muscle without getting super bulky. So you need to have the consistency piece. Remember, we're thinking intensity, we're thinking duration, and we're thinking frequency. That frequency piece really is that consistency piece. What we are decreasing is the duration or volume, all right? And we're maintaining the intensity and we are maintaining the frequency or the consistency.
Now, when you follow these tips, we wanted to give them to you because it's all about using your exercise to build your health and function. Now, if you do it a whole bunch, weight training, you can build some muscle. But again, we're advising scale back on the volume so that you can still get all the muscle benefits without having to build bulky muscle. And again, there are some genetic anomalies that get to have tons and tons of muscle without really trying, but most people aren't that. So if you're listening, you probably aren't that, and you can confidently do frequent resistance training 4 days a week or more, going intensely, scaling back on the volume, meaning you don't do 20 sets.
Right.
You maybe go through each exercise 2 or 3 times rather than 12, right? Mm-hmm. We're looking at that instead of scaling back on the intensity and going towards something that is just lightweight or yoga or Pilates. There's a time and place for those, but what those don't do, that resistance training will do, is that resistance training will allow you to work on your brain health, your muscle health, and your bone health, all of which will decrease unless you're doing something about it. And exercise is a great tool to make sure that you're preserving and building each of those.
Absolutely. And so these concepts that we talked about today, this is a lot of what we're going to teach you the practical application of during the upcoming One Workout Away Challenge, which starts on April 30th. Now, as a premium member of the Exercise for Life membership, you get access to this entire One Workout Away Challenge completely for free. That's all the live workouts, all the bonus workouts, all the exercise education, as well as everything that's already built in to the Exercise for Life membership, our entire library of workouts, all of our premium level courses, everything like that. So all you have to do to be able to get access not only to the upcoming One Workout Away Challenge, but everything within the Exercise for Life membership is go to www.exerciseforlifestudios.com/membership. Now remember, access to the One Workout Away Challenge is only available for premium level members. If you are a monthly member, you can still get in on the One Workout Away Challenge. You just have to sign up for it separate of your membership. But if you enroll at the premium level, which actually breaks down to less dollars per year, then you can get access to every One Workout Away Challenge over the next 12 months. So again, that's www.exerciseforlifestudios.com/membership. So who do you know that needs to hear this episode? Who do you know that knows that they want to get stronger or get the benefits of exercise, maybe build a little bit of muscle, tone up, firm up, something like that, but they're either A, worried about building too much muscle, or B, worried that, well, if I start doing the stuff that I think I need to do, I'm going to hurt myself. Share this episode with them so they can understand how to go about changing their workouts to not only make sure they're able to get all of the benefits in terms of building strength, firming up, toning up, everything like that, without risking injury, but also to understand what they should be focused on while they are exercising to make sure that the workout today sets them up to come back and work out again tomorrow. And while you're online, head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It helps people find our podcast when they're looking for information on exercise and when they're looking for information on health. So if you found value in this conversation today, let us know by leaving us a 5-star rating and review. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week. This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Julie and Charlie Gates, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.